And here's what's interesting, and the folks at Barbell Medicine, I think first, at least I first heard it from them, although it's been around for a long time. You don't add weight to get stronger. You get stronger so you can add weight. The adaptation has already occurred. And people think that if you move a heavier weight slower, you didn't necessarily get stronger. You're just grinding a little harder, which is why a lot of the elite lifters, whether it's Lane Norton or Mike Teixeira, they'll measure bar velocity. And they'll determine whether or not they've gotten stronger based on can they move the same weight faster. And that's one of the ways they quote unquote auto regulate. They get midway or 3/4 of the way through a workout, and they're not going to add weight to a bar if they aren't moving it as fast or faster than they had previously. It may demonstrate that the adaptation has not yet occurred, and that any addition of weight beyond that is going to be moved slower, which isn't, this is strictly talking in terms of powerlifting, isn't necessarily a good thing. So there are two different conversations, hypertrophy and powerlifting, but I still think that it comes down to effort or perceived level of effort, and that can be a trained trait.
Muscle memory. Circling back to the over 40 guy, right? Maybe he had this background. He was an athlete growing up in high school, through his early 20s, stayed in relatively decent shape. And then life catches up with all of us. I witnessed this later in my 30 years. I had a wake up call last year. I looked at myself, in a photo that I was taken at an ice plunge event. I was like, oh my God, you're completely out of shape. And I quickly got it back. And I know a lot of that was because of the muscle memory, I believe, right? So what is the scientific evidence of muscle memory? And maybe for the guy that, had it earlier on, like, is it going to be easier for him post 40 to bring a lot of this stuff back?
Yeah, there is some good evidence for muscle memory. And, it's been a little while since I've reviewed the literature, and so I'm having a hard time describing the mechanism. I used to think it was satellite cell proliferation, and I'm not sure if that stands today. But I do know that the current consensus amongst, that the domain-specific professionals, the Greg Nuckols of the world and the Eric Helms and those who have written on this subject, suggest that there is a muscle memory component that when you have a lapse of training and they get back into training, you can recover at a faster rate than, say, somebody who hasn't earned that muscle previously. And I hesitate to delve further into the mechanism, but we do see a signal there. And so, yeah, I think that anybody at any age can realize, I think I'm trying to remember if it was Hormone that did this. It's been 6-7 years ago, put on like 30 pounds in 12 weeks or something like that. But 22 of it, he had already acknowledged, was muscle that he had previously had that he had lost. And that the other people that were participating with him also made significant progress, but not to his degree because they didn't have, his level of previous achievement. And I think that Greg Nuckols is the one who wrote the program for them, which they followed somewhat loosely. But before I forget about it, I just have to mention that because it's the elephant in the living room, as you get into your 40s and 50s, if you're having a hard time getting stronger or gaining lean mass, or you've lost a significant amount of mass and your body composition has changed for the worse, a lot of that is lifestyle habits. But at some point, if it's very challenging for you to regain your strength and size, or a reasonable amount of strength and size, hormone testing becomes pretty important, because in the absence of sufficient testosterone and IGF-1, some people may have a declining growth hormone, which at some point you see a decline in IGF-1. Those are pretty key components. Women, thyroid, can be affected, and those can all have adverse effects on, energy levels to train. Just your enthusiasm for working out is a huge component. Me, I've always said compliance is a science, and if you're just not enjoying getting to the gym, or don't have the energy, or if the workouts seem lackluster, get a blood test. Now they're so unbelievably affordable. I don't mean to pitch anybody here, but I've been working promoting Merrick Health for years. But over 10 years ago, I was talking about getting online blood tests and referring people to companies that you could just download a form and take it to like a LabCorp or a Quest, and within 3 or 4 days you had results that were pretty comprehensive. But 10 years ago, I was paying $300-400 for the tests that are now $150 through Merrick, a real comprehensive profile that they allowed me to set up that I've got on my website. And again, it's just, I've been talking about it for a long time. I'm not trying to sell anything here, but it's really important as you get in, particularly as you get into your 40s and 50s, to at least get a baseline. And I've also said, in my Iceland seminar, some almost 9 years ago, it's got almost 7 million views now. I talked in detail through all of the vertical diet back in that seminar for nearly 2 hours. I said that if you get a blood test back and it looks horrible, implement some lifestyle changes first. Optimize your sleep. Maybe you've got apnea. Exercise regularly, stress management. Change your diet. Start going to the gym a little bit, and see if within 60 days you haven't made some improvement. And in the absence of improvements, and you feel as though you've invested enough effort and consistency into all those other lifestyle habits, then maybe you need intervention, medical intervention, because it's quite common that people or men in their 40s and 50s, or women perimenopausal or postmenopausal, are going to suffer from hormone deficiencies that are going to significantly impact their ability to perform, even if it's just in terms of their energy and their ability to recover. That's a huge component. And then beyond that, of course, you're talking about estrogen and testosterone and IGF-1.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of them don't really understand the impact that your hormones have on just how you feel and operate throughout everyday life. Sitting here having a conversation, sitting at your desk, your work, you're running around with your kids. If your hormones are not optimized, you're going to be a lesser version of yourself in every single area of your life. Just in your, I guess, kind of generalized opinion, like, is there any reason as to why, once you've optimized the lifestyle stuff, if your numbers are still low, that you would say a guy shouldn't get on hormone replacement therapy?
It's kicking the can down the road. One of the things I worry about with low T, particularly if it's libido or erectile dysfunction, is what we call the canary in the coal mine. Is that a lot of times those problems, those pathologies, are the result of insulin resistance, and so now you've got this upswelling of potential, pre-diabetes. And taking testosterone doesn't solve that problem unless you lose weight and increase muscle mass significantly enough to utilize some of that glucose in your system. So what ends up happening is that you feel a little better in the short run. And this is why, in my experience, and I've been in the HRT close with people who are running HRT companies, and now, of course, as a mouthpiece for one. For 20 years. And one of the biggest problems is attrition, that most of these men generally turn over at a rate of about every 3 or 4 months. And we see it pretty consistently that the first 30 to 60 days, they get significant improvements that they're looking for. They feel better. They start working out. They might optimize their sleep a little. They go to the gym regularly, and they start seeing all these benefits. And then after about 30 days, they stop working out as consistently. They go back to eating pretty crappy, which is common with everyone, to be honest with you. That's part of the problem with long-term dietary adherence, is that everybody just tends to not adhere. And they exercise infrequently, and then some of those benefits start to wane, and then they're like, oh, this testosterone isn't working. And it's not a panacea. It doesn't work by itself. It can help, as we mentioned, as we've been talking about, it can help motivate you to do more, which is, you can't underestimate the importance of that, just the motivation, but it's not going to do it for you. And then what I worry about is that, if people get on testosterone and don't change their behaviors, is that the insulin resistance gets worse until such time that they have diabetes, full-blown diabetes. So that's what I'm cautious of. There's no easy fix, but when you have sufficient hormones, and I hate to use the word optimize, because then people think that they can go in there and tweak knobs and buttons, and suddenly things are going to change. But within the normal range, I'm talking about hypogonadal and people who are low T and hypothyroidism. People have low thyroidism, low thyroid, well below that of quote unquote the normal range. They're going to experience significant difficulty and adverse effects from that. But I'm just cautious, because then people go in and they want to try and manipulate everything, and it's very hard to do. Even endocrinologists struggle with something as routine as thyroid function in women, trying to quote unquote optimize, because different people respond differently to the dose, to the type, combination therapy. Some people do T4, T3. Some people just do T4. Some people just do T3, and then there's dosage to consider. And then that's just a matter of consistently giving feedback and getting testing to try and improve your health. I guess that sounds like optimizing, but there's no such thing. It's as much art as science, and you can't just see it. We always say treat the patient, not the numbers. And somebody might walk in there with a testosterone of 300 and feel fine, and somebody might walk in there with a testosterone of 500 or 600 and feel absolutely terrible. And so you kind of got to take everything into consideration. It really does require a professional with testing plus follow up, and trying to isolate variables rather than shotgunning. A lot of times people, they'll start getting into this whole supplement protocol, and they'll start taking all sorts of different vitamins and herbal therapies. And I mean, how do you determine, in multiple polypharmacy, how do you determine what effect you're getting and what's causing adverse effects if you're experiencing those? And so you gotta be careful and be patient, implement kind of one thing at a time, and get feedback, and do your part. It's a long, tedious process. It'd be no different than if somebody came in with IBS, and they undergo a low FODMAP diet and then have to reintroduce foods. That can be a long, tedious process of tracking and looking at trying to recover from something like that. And patience is the hard part. And then people who tend to deviate from the plan is generally what happens, is they just start going back to their old habits.